first and only vice presidential debate of 2020.
All right, here we go.
Sponsored by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm Susan Page of USA Today. It is
All right, so Susan Page is the moderator.
An important part of our democracy. In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience...
All right, while she's opening up, hey, it's Corey here, and I'm going to do a reaction to this debate and commentate over it. Got my Bible here just in case I need to respond to some things that they're going to say, and I'm definitely going to need to respond to some of the things that they're going to say. This is the vice presidential debate, October 7th, 2020, between Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence. I'm excited to see how this is going to go. Hopefully and surely this is going to be better than the debate that we just watched between Biden and Trump. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Here we go.
Thank you.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive
All right, here we go.
for COVID-19. We send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery and for the recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus. The two campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules.
I hope it's loud enough.
I'm here to enforce them on behalf of the millions of Americans who are watching. One note, no one in either campaign or at the Commission or anywhere else has been told in advance what topics I'll raise or what questions I'll ask. This 90-minute debate will be divided into 9 segments of about 10 minutes each. I'll begin a segment by posing a question to each of you.
Are they standing behind plastic and glass? Really?
On the same topic.
Oh my gosh.
2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times, but we can and will have a
Are you implying that the first presidential debate wasn't civil?
Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much.
All right, we're on coronavirus.
Senator Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns?
This is important.
Schools and hotspots? A federal mandate?
This is very important.
You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts.
That's not true.
220,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been
I'm not pro-Trump. I didn't vote for him in 2016, but
who in the last several months
he's not the worst president that we have ever had. That's just not true.
The vice president and the president were informed.
Obviously not true.
About the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, that today they still don't have a plan. They still don't have a plan. Well, Joe Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing.
All right, here's the
for
plan.
administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all. That is the plan that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country.
All right, I'm going to turn that down a little bit. Well, I won't turn it down too much.
Their right to re-election based on this.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have
You know, no, I'll pause it right there. What she just said about a vaccine and making sure a vaccine's free for everybody. If anyone's seen my videos before, people know where I stand on coronavirus. Coronavirus isn't a hoax. Coronavirus is real, but it's not as bad as liberal media is saying. I mean, it has over a 99% chance survival rate. I mean, it's not the flu, but it's on par with things like the flu and influenza, swine flu. It's those kinds of things where it's a real disease, and there's a seriousness to that. But at the same time, when the survival rate is that high and the mortality rate is so low, we really can't call this just some like horrible plague, pandemic, catastrophe. We don't do this for the flu or those other diseases. And, you know, biblically, Leviticus 13, leprosy is going around in Leviticus 13. People who are sick, quarantine, people who are healthy, aren't required to do anything. They're just free to go and live their lives. That's how we need to treat this issue. Leprosy is worse than coronavirus. Also, the idea of having a vaccine and it being free, it's not the government's job to be over our health or to be involved in healthcare. Romans 13, the purpose of government is to punish evil, and this has nothing to do with that. And it being free for all, it's not really free because someone's paying for it through taxation, forced taxation, which is stealing, and this is just a form of socialism anyway. So that's just important to note. Their plan isn't biblical. Their plan is tyrannical. So let's do this. I'm going to try not to pause it. Maybe I'll just turn the volume down or speak over it because I don't want this to take too long.
Died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other.
I respect Pence more than I respect.
For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door. You head the
Trump.
administration's coronavirus task force. Why is the U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population higher?
I think he's
than
much
that of
more
almost every other wealthy country.
respectful,
You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
and
Susan, thank you.
his conduct is just overall better.
University of Utah for hosting this event, and Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. You know, our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China.
He's done a better job than the
President
Democrats.
Donald Trump did what no other American president
Not a perfect
had ever
job
done.
at all,
And that was he suspended
but a better
all
job than the
travel from
Democrats.
China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And I believe it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives. Because with that time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date. We were able to see to the delivery of billions of supplies so our doctors and nurses had the resource and support they needed. And we began, really before the month of February was out, to develop a vaccine and to develop medicines and therapeutics that have been saving lives all along the way. And under President Trump's leadership, Operation Warp Speed, we believe, will have literally tens of millions of doses of vaccine before the end of this year. The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. And quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people,
That's kind of funny.
I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country,
Okay, I have to talk about that. I would recommend anyone to go to Steven Crowder's Change My Mind segment where he talks about the COVID death rate being inflated. The death rate is inflated. We don't know just exactly how many people have died of solely because of coronavirus being in their system. We don't know if all of these deaths are COVID deaths, so it's less than what liberal media is saying for sure. But also the idea that we can stop disease spreading, like you can't, like, blaming Trump for coronavirus spreading throughout the land is kind of like blaming Obama for swine flu, right? I mean, H1N1 went around when Obama was in office. I mean, you can't really blame world leaders, at least I mean, unless they're doing like biological warfare or something. But you can't really just look at a disease spreading and be like, oh, well, this is the president's fault. It's just dumb. We live in a world where people die. Like Trump isn't like. They're acting like Trump was able to stop everyone from dying, and that's just bullcrap.
Lives that have been lost, families that are grieving that loss. And you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan,
I want to add, but Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I'm
speaking.
Yeah, you can have 15 more seconds, and then we'll give the vice president a chance to respond.
So I want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm were you when your children couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?
Let's give Vice President Pence.
Okay, see that? Gosh, I'm going to try to not turn this down. I think I'm just going to turn it down more than I am going to pause this. Biden did this same kind of emotional appeal last debate, and you didn't really see Trump do that, if memory serves right. That kind of emotional appeal where it's like, don't you want your grandma to live? Don't you, want this, that, or this? It's kind of like an SPCA commercial. Like, that's emotionalism. Like, that's not an argument. That's not an argument as to whether something's right or wrong or if something's biblical or unbiblical. Like Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings. Your feelings are not facts. We have to stop these emotional arguments because they're just bad, man.
The chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to respond.
There's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one. And I want all of you to know that you'll always be in our hearts and in our prayers. But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made. The reality, if I may finish, Senator, the reality is Dr. Fauci said everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now,
She
President
seems a
Trump, I will
little
tell you, has
feisty.
boundless confidence in the American people, and he always spoke with confidence that we'd get through this together. But when you say it hasn't worked, when Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans. Now, that's the
And see, that's another thing that I'm going to say. Shutting down the economy, any part of it should have never happened. That's just not biblical. It is tyrannical. Don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. Leviticus 13. I'm appealing to Leviticus 13. Leprosy is worse than coronavirus. If leprosy was going around and we didn't have a cure, the government still has no right to come in, make people pretend to be sick, and close down all their stuff. Nope.
reality.
Thank you.
They also
Thank you,
said
Vice
to us if
President
we did
Pence.
everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice
Now,
President
one
Pence.
life lost is too
Thank you.
many.
Takes more than 15 seconds to
But the
respond. I
American
hate how
people,
these
I
debates
believe,
are set up,
deserve
man.
credit for the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first
Thank you, Vice
responders.
President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were your administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8
Trump
months
got COVID and is
that
recovering
when
just
given the
fine.
facts, they're willing to put the health of their families.
It's
and their
not as
neighbors
bad as
and
they're
their
saying.
own first.
You don't have to wear masks,
President Trump and
take
I
them
have great
things off.
confidence in the American people and
Especially if
their
in your car.
ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic, when we were losing a heartbreaking number of
Check my phone.
2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York and New Orleans and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney
Yes,
Barrett.
thank you. Thank you, Vice
But
President
at that,
Pence.
if I may say, that Rose Garden event, there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested
Yes.
for coronavirus, and it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and
I could be wrong, but this
The
moderator
difference here is
seems to be much
President
better
Biden trusts the
than Chris
American people
Wallace could dream
make
to be.
choices in the best interest of them.
He was a terrible moderator.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you. Thank you,
the
Vice
Green New
President Pence.
Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk about respecting the American people.
All right, got to say that I'm not going to pause it anymore. I'm just gonna turn it down and talk, because this is going to take forever if I do it this way. Freedom, that's very important. We have a First Amendment in this country, and part of that is the freedom of religion and freedom of assembly. So, and being able to assemble outside is actually a biblical concept. God made us. First of all, God didn't make us to have to cover our faces all day and night, but God also made us to get together for church, to get together and go outside and walk the earth that He made us to walk on. So that's something that needs to be talked about. The government does not have the right to come and tell you that you can't do those things. Also, again, First Amendment, the right to assembly. You have the right to assemble. That includes church, that includes in your home, that includes in public outdoor places, and that includes your job. So,
You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage
Which we've
to be a
always
leader
done.
speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on
the Green New
information that
Deal
if
is
you
also
had as a
garbage.
parent, if you had as a worker knowing you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration that was unwilling to speak the truth to the American people. So let's talk about caring about the American people. The American people have had to sacrifice far too much because of the incompetence of this administration. It is asking too much of the people.
Susan, we talked
No,
about
Vice
It is
President
asking
Pence.
too much of the people.
Let-
That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect
Susan,
their parents
President-
and
No,
their
I'm
children.
sorry. Kamala
We
Harris-
have
Senator
lots of
Harris,
info
I'm
on
sorry.
COVID.
Fine, I'm Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now say they wouldn't take a vaccine if it was released now. If the Trump
Important
administration
question.
approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it. Absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of
I'm
the
not taking it.
president.
I don't want
One
the
of you will
vaccine.
make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on
Well,
to the
thank
issue
you,
of
but I would like to
vice
go back
presidency.
because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical
He is
trials.
so much more
We're right
respectful
now
than Trump.
producing
I gotta
millions of doses.
I just gotta say that, man. Like his rhetoric, his way of speaking to someone,
Confidence in a vaccine.
like
If the
this is
vaccine emerges
better.
during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives. The reality is that we will have a vaccine, we believe, before the end of this year. And it will have the capacity to save countless American lives, and your continuous undermining.
Kamala
of
doesn't care
confidence
about
in
people's
vaccines,
lives.
It's just unacceptable.
I'll say that she doesn't care about people's lives. She's arrested so many people for bull crap. I mean, so many people. What is it, like 1,000 to 2,000 on marijuana charges? A lot of them are black people. It's something voters should know. Radically pro-choice. Yeah, she doesn't really care about people's lives. Politicizing people's lives is kind of what she does.
Not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal
That's
as
important.
the coronavirus, in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong.
We
And
did nothing
we learned from that.
back
They
then
left
for
the
that.
strategic national stockpile empty.
The right thing to do,
Left,
apply
a
Leviticus
Hollow
13.
plan, but we
Thank you,
still
Vice
learn
President
from it,
Pence.
and I think
Vice
Freedom.
President Pence, your
people,
time
I'm
is
gonna
up.
say
Freedom
we're
over
Vice
proud
President Pence, I'm
safety.
sorry, your
what
time
we
is
have
up.
done, and Senator, please
Thank you, Vice
stop
President
undermining
Pence.
confidence.
freedom
in
is
vaccines.
safety.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked
Sure.
Vice President Pence, which is, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with Vice President Biden about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, and if you win the election next month, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life. I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be
This is funny to me. I'm sure to a lot of people watching, because she hated Biden in the Democratic debates. What happened to Me Too? I guess Me Too gets thrown out the window if you get a seat. You're inconsistent, Kamala. You're very inconsistent. It's one of the most memorable moments of your life. You hated him before that call.
I have a career that included being elected the first woman district attorney of San Francisco, where I created models of innovation for law enforcement in terms of reform of the criminal justice system. I was elected the first
terrible job, by the way,
and black woman to be elected Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States.
So many tyrannical arrests.
The United States Department of Justice.
Nobody should be in jail for marijuana use.
From transnational criminal organizations to the big banks that were taking
She is
advantage
not a
of
hero
homeowners,
for black
to
people.
for-profit colleges that were taking advantage of veterans. And then, of course, now I serve in the United States Senate as only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where I've been in regular receipt of classified information about threats to our nation and hotspots around the world. I've traveled the world. I've met with our soldiers in war zones. And I think Joe has asked me to serve with him because he knows that we share a purpose, which is about lifting up the American people. And after the 4 years that we have seen of Donald Trump unifying our country around our common values and principles.
Thank you, Senator Harris. You know, neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released a sort of detailed health information that had become
Smells like BS to me.
Until the 2016 election. And in recent days,
Lots of it,
President
too.
Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you in turn is this information voters deserve to know? Vice President Pence, would you like to go first?
Well, Susan, thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the President and the First Lady, how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the President. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted by the coronavirus. But the care the President received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right to know about the health and well-being of their President, and will continue to do that. But I'm just extremely grateful and was more than a little moved by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions of genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination. I never expected to be on this stage 4 years ago, so I know the feeling. But the reality is we've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year. And the stakes have never been higher, but I think the choice has never been clearer.
I want to give Senator Harris a chance to respond to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more detailed health information about presidential candidates?
This is kind of boring.
Especially when they're facing some kind of challenge.
Absolutely.
This really is
Joe Biden has
boring so far.
Incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of health records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said, "You mean $750,000?" And it was like, no, $750. We now know Donald Trump owes and is in debt for $400 million. And just so everyone is clear, when we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody. And it'd be really good to know who the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, owes money to, because the American people have a right to know what is influencing the President's decisions. And is he making those decisions on the best interest of the American people, of you, or self-interest?
Here's what I'll say about that. Taxation is theft. It's theft. taxes should be radically lowered, and forced taxation honestly should just be abolished.
Thank you, Senator Harris. I want to give you a chance to respond, Vice President.
Well, look, I respect the fact that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your public service as well.
Thank you.
The American people have a president who's a businessman, who's a job creator, who's paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of thousands of American jobs. And the president said those public reports are not accurate. And the president's also released literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review just as the law allows. But the distinction
Man, I don't care.
That Joe Biden, 47 years.
I don't care about this. This is just boring.
Trump, who brought all of that
Like,
experience
you know,
4 years ago.
Thank you,
and
Vice
I'm all
turned
for-
this economy around by cutting
I'm all for talking about what Scripture says about taxation and, you know, lowering/abolishing taxes, because there's way too much tax in this country. Forced taxation should be abolished. Like, biblically speaking, there shouldn't be income tax. It's the way taxes are in this country right now. It's tyranny. It's unbiblical. And man, but beyond that, I just don't care about listening to this topic for so long.
In the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere, hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work. Nearly 11 million jobs that existed at the beginning of the year haven't been replaced. Those hardest hit include Latinos, blacks, and women. Senator Harris, the Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations. Some economists warn that could curb entrepreneurial ventures that fuel growth and create jobs. Would raising taxes put the recovery at risk? And you have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Thank you. On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes you measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker and the American family. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who measures the strength of the economy based on how rich people are doing, which is why he passed a tax bill benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America, leading to a $2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have to pay for. On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it.
Of course he will. Of course he will, because he's a tyrant.
And through a plan that is about investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure. It's about upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable energy.
Oh my gosh, we're on this too.
That money in what we need to do around innovation. There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in...
All right, all right, hold on. I gotta turn it down for that. Believed in science. This is a woman that is pro-abortion. Okay? We live in a country right now full of people who think, who are saying, oh, it's just a clump of cells. It's not actually a baby after 9 months. Even though that's not the primary argument anymore. If you watch, like Apologia Church and other people going to abortion clinics, most people are saying they know and that they're okay with murdering the baby. But these people are saying things like, oh, it's the mother's decision, it's their body, and things like that. So we also live in a country where people can't tell the difference between men and women and think there are more than two genders. The liberals complaining about believing in science is absolutely absurd. Also, science only makes sense in the Christian worldview. It's God's science. So, okay.
The average American family of four
Turn that up.
$2,000 in savings and taxes. And with the rise in wages that occurred, most predominantly for blue-collar, hard-working Americans, The average household income for a family of four increased by $4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts.
Well, you know what? Turn that down again. Tax cuts are good because making rich people pay more in taxes is actually unbiblical. Contradicts Exodus 30 that says not to do that. But at the same time, tax cuts are just good in general because we have a tyrannical form of taxation in this country right now. There are too many taxes. And if you don't pay them, you get punished. Even though that's not evil, you get punished anyway. Which contradicts Romans 13. So that's a problem. But also, the 1%, the people at the top, those are the people that pay the most in taxes and the people that make the jobs for other people. They're our friends. Like, they keep the economy going. And the economy, yeah, okay, you need healthy people that aren't getting sick and dying in the economy, but you don't help the economy by shutting down the economy and starving people either. It's just a bad argument, Kamala. And you know, she's saying, oh, you know, Biden thinks that the economy is strong when the workers are healthy. It's like, why don't you just take that further and push it for socialized medicine? Because that's where you're really wanting to go with that. And that's, you know, unbiblical too. I talked about that earlier, and I talked about that in some of my other videos. But also, Trump just wanting people to be rich. No, it's more like not shutting them down, even though there was a shutdown. Letting people work and feed themselves. You need to eat to be healthy.
That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
that is
that's the math.
absolutely not true.
Just let people keep their money.
Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who's in court right now, trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which means that you will lose protections if you
get rid of it.
Conditions, and this is very
get rid of it.
important, Susan.
We don't need it.
But we need to give Vice President.
He interrupted me, and I'd like to just finish, please. If you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, they're coming for you. If you love someone who has a pre-existing condition,
Thank
they're
you, Senator
coming
Harris.
for you. If you are under the age of 26 on your
It is
parents'
nonsense.
coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator Harris, thank you.
You're
Let me
welcome.
give you a chance to respond.
Well, I hope we have a chance to talk about health care because Obamacare was a disaster.
I'm almost 26 and I don't think they're coming for me.
President Trump and I have a plan.
Obamacare is a disaster. Pence is right. I got to tell you, when Biden did this too, and I really like that Pence is not doing this. This is a debate between those two people. Why is she looking in the camera and talking to us? Stop making an emotional appeal to people. That is not an argument. That's not helping you win the debate.
original Green New Deal. More taxes, more regulation.
This debate is better, though.
Abolishing fossil fuel, crushing American energy, and economic surrender to China is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing.
That's true.
The V-shaped recovery that's underway right now will continue with 4 more years of President Donald Trump.
Thank you very, very much, Vice President Pence. Once again, you've
I think they'll win, but I mean, obviously, I don't know for sure.
And Vice President Pence, I'd like
No
to
one does.
pose the first question to you. This year, we've seen record-setting hurricanes in the south. Another one, Hurricane Delta, is now threatening the Gulf. And we have seen record-setting wildfires in the west. Do you believe, as the scientific community has concluded, that man-made climate change has made
Not the entire
wildfires
scientific
bigger,
community.
hotter, and more deadly, and have made hurricanes wetter, slower, and more damaging? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation. According to all of the best estimates, our air and land are cleaner than any time ever recorded, and our water is among the cleanest in the world.
We do have very clean air, clean air, land, and water.
The largest investment in our public lands and public parks in 100 years. So President Trump has made a commitment to conservation and to the environment.
Cleaner than it used to be.
With regard to climate change, the climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. They'd impose the Green New Deal, which would crush American energy, would increase the energy costs of American families in their homes, and literally would crush American jobs. And President Trump and I believe that the progress that we have made in a cleaner environment has been happening precisely because we have a strong free market economy. You know, what's remarkable is the United States has reduced CO2 more than the countries that are still in the Paris Climate Accord, but we've done it through innovation, and we've done it through natural gas and fracking, which, Senator, the American people can go look at the record.
It's true. We use fossil fuels to clean our air.
But the both of you repeatedly committed to abolishing fossil fuel and banning
water.
Fracking. And so by creating the kind of
fracking is good. Getting those fuels from the earth is a good thing.
With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely correct.
The Oceanic Administration tells us that actually, as difficult as they are,
thank you, Vice President.
You need controlled fires, and you need forest management. Otherwise, those wildfires are going to keep happening, and they're going to probably get worse.
To try and sell their bill of goods of a Green New Deal, and President Trump and I are going to always put American jobs and American workers first.
Senator Harris, as the Vice President mentioned, you co-sponsored the Green New Deal in Congress. But Vice President Biden said in last week's debate that he does not support the Green New Deal. But if you look at the Biden-Harris campaign website, it describes the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. What exactly would be the stance of a Biden-Harris administration toward the Green New Deal? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Sure. So first of all, I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact. I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year.
That's not good enough. You shouldn't increase them for anyone.
Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy. Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn this down real quick. CO2 is not a bad gas. CO2 is fundamental to life. Patrick Moore talks about this. He does. He has videos on Prager. I don't agree with everything he says in terms of, Big Bang, evolution, all that stuff. But he talks about CO2 not being a bad gas. CO2 is fundamental to life. CO2 has always been in the atmosphere. You need CO2. More CO2 means more life. More CO2 is good for plants. It's essentially plant food. More CO2 means more oxygen. There needs to be CO2. It's not a bad thing. Fossil fuels aren't bad either. Fossil fuels are organic. Oil, coal, and natural gas comes from dead organisms that are in the ground, and it comes straight from the earth. They're organic. And we burn them for fuel, and we use them for literally everything. We literally use them for just about everything. Ain't nobody giving up fossil fuels. It's also not unbiblical to use them. God is totally okay with using dead animals for our benefit. That includes fossil fuel. God is the one who gave us fossil fuel. It's okay to use it. We're not restricted under God's law to use fuel, or restricted to use fuel at all. Man is not changing the climate. The climate, the temperature of the earth always has had to do with the sun. Wildfires are not happening because we drive cars. Hurricanes aren't happening because we drive cars. It's just called living on planet Earth. God controls the weather. We are not God. So.
We've made great progress reducing CO2 emissions through American innovation and the development of natural gas through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New Deal that would impose all new mandates on American businesses and American families.
Thank you.
Joe Biden wants us
Thank
to
you, Vice
retrofit
President.
4 million.
He's
Vice
absolutely right. It's
buildings.
tyrannical.
It makes no
It's
sense.
evil.
It will
It's not
cost
biblical.
Jobs. President Trump
Thank
is
you,
going to
Vice
put
President.
America first. He's going to put jobs first, and we're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
Thank
But,
you, Vice
on
President.
the issue of jobs,
Senator Harris.
let's talk about that. The Vice President earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the President's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is, because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it. And when we look at where this administration has been, there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential administration. And the American people know what I'm talking about. You know, I think about 20-year-olds. We have a 20-year-old, a 20-something-year-old, who are coming out of high school and college right now, and you're wondering, is there going to be a job there for me? We're looking at people who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent by the end of the month. Almost half of American renters are worried about whether they're going to be able to pay rent by the end of the month. This is where the economy is in America right now.
Here's a good solution to that. Deregulate businesses. Stop. The government should just stop forcing businesses to do things and follow certain regulations. Let the free market be the free market, and abolish taxation by force. Get rid of income taxes. Let people keep their money, and people will easily be able to work and pay their rent.
Again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs, and President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back. In our first 3
That's
years after we cut back
absolutely
the
true.
rollback
That is
regulation, unleashed
absolutely
American
true.
energy, this administration.
I just watched that in the last few days. That is absolutely true.
And that's exactly the kind of growth we're going to continue to see as we bring our nation through
Thank you, Vice
this
President
pandemic.
Pence.
But a Green New
Thank you,
Deal, your
Vice
massive
President
new
Pence.
mandates, your Paris Climate Accord, it's going to kill jobs this time, just like it killed jobs.
I'd like
Susan,
to-
I just need to respond.
Tyranny always kills jobs.
Thank you. Thank you. Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it. So let's set the record straight. Thank you.
I'd like to talk about China. We have, as our next topic, we have no more complicated or consequential foreign relationship than the one with China. It is a huge market for American agricultural goods. It's a potential partner in dealing with climate change in North Korea. And in a video tonight, President Trump again blamed it for the coronavirus, saying China will pay. Vice President Pence, how would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Competitors, adversaries, enemies? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Susan. Well, before I leave that, let me speak to voting records if I can. You know, everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land. American people deserve to know Senator Kamala Harris was one of only 10 members of the Senate to vote against the USMCA. It was a huge win for American auto workers. It was a huge win for American farmers, especially dairy in the upper Midwest.
Kamala is
But Senator, you
inconsistent. She's so inconsistent.
That you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and ahead of American jobs. The American people deserve to know that. It's probably why Newsweek magazine said that Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019. More liberal than Bernie Sanders, more liberal than any of the others.
Wow, I didn't know that.
United States Senate. So now with regard to China, look, Susan, first and foremost, China is to blame for the coronavirus. And President Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear, made it clear again today. China and the World Health Organization did not play straight with the American people. They did not let our personnel into China to get information on the coronavirus until the middle of February. Fortunately, President Trump,
China is to blame.
With China from the outset of this administration, standing
I mean,
up to China.
Communist regimes are going to communist regime. They are an evil government over there.
President Trump made that decision before the end of January to suspend all travel from China. And again, the American people deserve to know Joe Biden opposed President Trump's decision to suspend all travel from China. He said it was hysterical. He said it was xenophobic. But President Trump has stood up to China. We're going to continue to stand strong.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
We want to improve the relationship, but we're going to level the playing field, and we're going to hold China accountable for what they did to America with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked the Vice President. How would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Are we competitors, adversaries, enemies? You'll have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Susan, the Trump administration's perspective and approach to China has resulted in the loss of American lives, American jobs, and America's standing. There's a weird obsession that President Trump has had with getting rid of whatever accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden. For example, they created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of disease experts that President Obama and Vice President Biden dispatched to China.
So tired of hearing about COVID.
What is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now are looking at 210,000 Americans who have lost their lives. Let's look at the job situation. We mentioned before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession. and the American consumer paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of that
Don't
failed
care about this. Man, this
war
debate's
that they call it. Then let's talk
boring.
about Standing. Pew,
So boring.
the reputable research firm,
You know, honestly, I don't really care if
has
this one
done an
gets
analysis
copyrighted and I have to take it down.
that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied
Because,
countries
oh my gosh,
have
man.
now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today because of a failure of leadership by this administration.
Senator Harris, we've seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years. And of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What is your definition of the role of American leadership in 2020?
So, you know, Joe is, I love talking with Joe about a lot of these issues. And, you know, Joe, I think he said—
You hated him.
He says, you know, foreign policy, it might sound—
You hated him before he called you.
So just think about it as relationships. And so we know this in our personal and professional relationships. You got to keep your word to your friends. You got to be loyal to your friends. People who've stood with you, got to stand with them. You got to know who your adversaries are and keep them in check. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is that he has betrayed our friends and embraced dictators around the world. Let's take, for example, Russia. So, I serve on the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate. America's intelligence community told us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States.
Oh my gosh.
And is playing
We're
in 2016.
still on this
Christopher Wray,
conspiracy
the director
theory.
of the FBI, said the same.
Oh my
But Donald
gosh,
Trump,
man.
the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, prefers to take the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the American intelligence community.
How many times
You
do
look
we
at
have
our
to
friends at
debunk
NATO.
this?
He has
Or how many
walked
times does it have to
away
be debunked?
from agreements. You can look at the Iran nuclear deal, which now has put us in a position where we are less safe because they are building up what might end up being a significant nuclear arsenal. We were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, coupled with his isolationism, he pulled us out and has made America less safe. So, Susan, it's about relationships. And the thing that has always been part of the strength of our nation, in addition to our great military, has been that we keep our word. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that because he doesn't understand what it means to be honest.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, thank you. Well, President Trump kept his word when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. When Joe Biden was vice president, they promised to do that, and they never did. We've stood strong with our allies, but we've been demanding. NATO is now contributing more to our common defense than ever before, thanks to President Trump's leadership. We've strengthened our alliances across the Asia-Pacific, and we've stood strong against those who would do us harm. You know, when President Trump came into office, ISIS had captured an area of the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. But President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader, al-Baghdadi, without one American casualty. Al-Baghdadi was responsible for the death of thousands. But notably, America's hearts today are with the family of Kayla Mueller, the parents of which are here with us tonight in Salt Lake City. Today, 2 of the ISIS killers responsible for Kayla Mueller's murder were brought to justice in the United States. Jihadi John was killed on the battlefield along with the other beetle. The reality is that when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Kayla Mueller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Kayla was. Baghdadi had held her for 18 months, abused her mercilessly before they killed her. But when Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier. And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Thank you, Vice
Look,
President.
we destroyed the ISIS caliphate. And you talk about re-entering the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, the last administration...
I actually wasn't aware of that story.
$1 billion to the leading state sponsor
Thank you, Vice
of
President.
terrorism. President Donald Trump got us out of the deal.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And when Qasem Soleimani was traveling to Baghdad
Thank you,
to do
Vice
harm
President
to
Pence.
Americans, President Donald Trump took
Thank you,
him
Vice
out.
President Pence.
And America is
I think that whole thing with
safer, our
Soleimani was,
allies
I think it was,
are
what,
safer.
January this year?
No, President Donald Trump will never
Thank you,
hesitate
Vice President
to take
Pence.
action.
I would like to give
I'd-
Senator Harris a chance to respond, but
Thank you.
not at such great length, because of course there are other topics we want to talk about.
But I would like equal time.
Yes,
Thank you.
please go ahead.
First of all, to the
I do
Taylor
think they should
family,
have more time.
I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened
mean,
to her is awful.
It just takes more time to articulate arguments and talk about
And I know Joe
topics.
feels the same way.
So,
And I know that President Obama feels
Yeah.
the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there. So after the strike on Soleimani, there was a counter strike on our troops in Iraq. And they suffered serious brain injuries. And do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers. Donald Trump, who
Biden
went to
called them
Arlington
bastards.
Cemetery and stood above
I don't know the
graves
context, but I
of our
mean,
fallen heroes
take that into
and
consideration.
said, what's in it for them?
Yeah, so at first I was actually for the Soleimani strike. Upon further consideration and really biblical insight, I'm not there anymore. I don't think it fits within just war theory, and just war is absolutely a biblical theology and teaching of war and how we should approach that subject. This is boring.
On the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is? It's somebody puts a price on your head and they will pay it if you are killed. And Donald Trump...
When I heard
went
bounty,
up
I
to
immediately
6
thought
times
Grand Theft Auto 5 online,
and
killing
never
people for
brought up the
bounties.
subject. Joe Biden would never do that.
Thank
Joe
you.
Biden would, but Joe Biden
Yeah.
would hold Russia to account for any threat to our nation's security or to our troops who are sacrificing their lives for the sake of our democracy and our safety.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
We're
This
not a
is such an
democracy,
important
we're a
issue, but we have
republic.
other important
Stop
issues
calling
as
us a
well.
democracy.
I want to make sure we have a chance
I
to
really
annoying.
wanna
talk about...
respond to that.
I'm
Look, she
Yeah.
has...
15 seconds because
Well, I got to
we're
have
trying
more
to
than
keep...
that. Look,
Well, I'm sorry, but Vice President
Look,
Pence, you've
I-
had more time than
look,
she's
the-
had
the
so far.
slanders against President Donald Trump regarding men and women of our armed forces.
He's not wrong for wanting
I'm
time.
sorry, Vice
My
President
son is a
Pence.
captain in the United
Yes.
States Marine Corps. My son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy. I can assure all of you, with sons and daughters serving in our military, President Donald Trump...
I am
has
totally
respect
okay
for
with both of them
years
talking over the
all those that
moderator
serve in
like
our
that.
armed forces and any
You
security
need more
force.
time.
It's ridiculous.
It's dumb how these are set
Let me
up.
also
Vice President
say
Pence,
There's a
Vice
the
President
American
Pence,
people
you
deserve,
know,
Susan,
Vice
the American
President
people
Pence, I
deserve to
didn't,
know...
Vice President
that-
Pence, I did not, excuse me,
Susan, the
I did
American
not
people
create
deserve
the
to know
rules for tonight.
Joe Biden...
Your
and Kam-
campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's
I-
debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates.
I would get a little frustrated too over those kinds of rules. Is bad. I mean, I've said this in other videos. Look up debates with atheists and Christians like Jeff Durbin, James White. They'll spend like 2 hours on one single topic. And they go into so much detail and take so much time. And I think you could do that with multiple topics as well, but with little time, so many topics, question to question, 15-second responses, that's just not enough time.
Vice President Pence, you're the former governor of Indiana. If Roe v. Wade is overturned,
Here we go.
what would you want Indiana to do? Would you want your home state to ban all abortions?
The most important thing tonight is this.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll use a little bit of my time to respond to that very important issue before. The American people deserve to know Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members.
I think it's important to talk about Soleimani, but Roe versus Wade is a little more pressing.
Didn't hesitate, and Qasem Soleimani is gone. But you deserve to know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually criticized the decision to take out Qasem Soleimani. It's really inexplicable.
I forgot what his first name was.
It's explainable. Because history records that Joe Biden actually opposed the raid against Osama bin Laden. It's absolutely essential that we have a commander-in-chief who will not hesitate to act to protect American lives and to protect American service members, and that's what you have in President Donald Trump.
Protect babies.
Now, with regard to the Supreme Court of the United States, let me say President Trump and I could not be more enthusiastic about the opportunity to see Judge Amy Coney Barrett become Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Now, she's a brilliant woman, and she will bring a lifetime of experience and a sizable American family to the Supreme Court of the United States. And our hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, we hope she gets a fair hearing.
That's absolutely true.
We particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian
Disappointed
faith that
with
we saw before.
Kavanaugh.
I mean, the Democrat chairman of
And I mean, the Supreme Court isn't going to overturn Roe v. Wade, but
when Judge Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals,
yeah, no, what Pence just said is
the dogma of
nail on
faith
head.
lived loudly in her. Dick Durbin of Illinois said that it was a concern. Senator, I know one of our judicial nominees you actually attacked because they were a member of the Catholic Knights of Columbus, just because the Knights of Columbus holds pro-life views and
Thank you.
pro-marriage views.
Thank you, Vice President
So
Pence. Your
my
time
hope
is
is
up.
that when the hearing takes place,
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
that Judge Amy Coney Barrett will be respected,
Thank you,
treated
Vice President
respectfully,
Pence.
voted and confirmed
Thank
to the
you.
Supreme Court of the United States.
Senator Harris, you're the senator from and former Attorney General of California. So let me ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to the Vice President. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want California to do? Would you want your home state to enact no restrictions on access to abortion? And you have 2 minutes.
this is important.
Interrupted.
Here we go.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, Joe Biden and I are both people of faith, and it's insulting to suggest that we would knock anyone for their faith. And in fact,
They're not
Joe,
Christians.
if elected, will be only the second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. On the issue of this nomination,
That's a
Joe
joke.
and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people.
No,
We
they
are
ain't
27 days before
they ain't got a
decision about who
clue
will be the next president of the United
about
States.
having a biblical worldview.
And, before, when this conversation has come up, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the process of voting right now. And so Joe has been very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House.
I'm voting in person.
And then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body.
And that's
It should be
why
her
you are
decision,
not a
by
Christian,
Donald Trump and
Kamala.
the Vice President, Michael Pence. But let's also look at what else is before the court. It's the Affordable Care Act. Like, literally,
You're not
in
a
the
Christian.
midst of a public health pandemic, when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million people
Trying to claim
probably
Christian
have what
faith
will be in the future
while
considered a
supporting the murder
pre-existing
of
condition
unborn
because
babies is
you contracted
bull
the
crap.
virus. Donald Trump is in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And I
All right.
said it
The question
before,
was on
and it bears
abortion, and
repeating.
she keeps
This
talking about other things.
means that there will be no more protections if they win for people with pre-existing conditions.
All right. Roe versus Wade. I've talked about this so many other times. It's murder. It's just murder. Exodus 21, I believe it's Exodus 21, says life for life if someone hits a pregnant woman in the stomach and that baby dies. God treats it as murder. Criminalize abortion. It's a crime in God's law, punishable by the death penalty, whether or not you're a male or female. Roe versus Wade is also not a law. The Supreme Court does not have the power to make laws in this country. It's never been a law. Ignore it. Majority Republican nominated Supreme Court in 1973. That is the reason for Roe v. Wade being accepted as law in our country. So the Supreme Court and the Republican Party really are not about abolishing abortion. So the Supreme Court's not the answer, obviously. But God's law sees it as murder. And that is exactly what we need to apply in the United States. And technically it already is, because Roe versus Wade is still not law. It's never been a law. It's murder. Again, it is murder. Kamala is like, claiming to be a Christian and a person of faith, and says the same thing about Joe Biden when they're okay with murder. You can't be okay with murder and love Jesus. You just can't. It's never been able to happen. So no, they're not people of faith in Jesus. They might be people of faith, but they're not people of faith in Jesus. Christ is king over all of you guys, Kamala and Biden, and he says something very different than what you say about Roe versus Wade. And quite frankly, on pretty much every political topic.
If you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed at the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864...
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
No, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume if you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham
Let's see if she answers
Lincoln
it.
Was up for re-election. And it was 27 days before the election. And a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate.
The Republican Party
said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people...
That's not constitutional at all.
And it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body.
That is straight up tyranny.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
She didn't answer the question either.
Now they'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about packing.
You once again gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Just say yes or no.
The American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court.
Exactly. That's why she's not answering.
Men and women,
it's obvious.
I tell you, people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to...
The president has the power at any point in his administration to put to fill a seat in the Supreme Court. Where does the Constitution say that you have to wait during an election year? It doesn't.
Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for life.
That is straight up tyranny.
Federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal.
What she's proposing about the court and waiting, and for some reason appealing to Abe Lincoln, because I mean that's not objective at all. Honestly, it's just appealing to one person's experience and thoughts. There's nothing objective about that. That's just straight up tyranny.
this is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator. Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered.
Here we go again.
So maybe
She didn't answer it, yeah.
Joe Biden will answer the question.
She never
I think
answered
the
it.
American people know the answer.
Thank you, Vice President.
They do know the answer.
In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in Louisville, was shot and killed after police officers executing a search warrant in a narcotics investigation broke into her apartment.
He shot
The
first.
police said they identified themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death.
What were they supposed to do?
Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
I don't believe so. And I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, and her family. And her family deserves justice. She was a beautiful young woman. She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street so she could then become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken unjustifiably and tragically and violently. And it brings me to, you know, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which an American man was tortured and killed under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer.
That doesn't have anything to do with Breonna Taylor's case.
And people around our country, of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe
They weren't all peaceful.
that, first of all, we are never
A lot
going
of them weren't.
to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform
Kamala,
of our
you're a
police
bad
in
cop.
America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I
Tyrannical cop.
immediately
You're
banned
not a
chokeholds
good
and
cop.
carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if we did that. We will require a national registry for police officers who break the law. We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform, get rid of private prisons and cash bail, and
Thank
we
you.
will decriminalize marijuana, and
Thank you, Senator Harris.
we will expunge the records of those who have
Thank you,
been
Senator
convicted of marijuana. This is
Thank
a
you,
time
Senator
for
Harris.
leadership on a tragic
She's
Senator Harris,
responsible
unarmed
for
black
an
people in America.
innumerable,
Thank you,
well,
Senator.
not innumerable, but for a crap
President
ton of
Pence, let me
people
pose
being
the same
arrested on
question to you.
marijuana charges.
In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion, Senator. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. Justice will be served.
There isn't, but that has
But
nothing to
there's
do with
also no
Breonna Taylor's
excuse
case.
for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be.
I'm going to turn this down for a second. I don't think Breonna Taylor should have died at all. She was dating a drug dealer. I'm not saying that she deserves to die for that. That's not my position. But she was dating a drug dealer, and, you know, getting in trouble with the law is what happens to drug dealers. It's my advice for people that know about this case is just, you know, don't date drug dealers. You know, that could happen. Now, he did shoot first. I don't like no knock warrants, but I think it's my understanding that they knocked and identified themselves. Either way, they didn't come there with intent to murder. He shot first. That's intent to murder. To my understanding of the situation and the facts, they fired back in self-defense for their own lives, and in the crossfire, Brianna was shot while she was in a hallway. She wasn't asleep. So I mean, that's very different than what the media said. Okay.
The lives of African Americans,
Thank you, Vice
record
President
unemployment, record
Vice
investments in
President Pence, your time
education,
is
and
up.
will fight for school choice for all of our members.
Thank you, Vice
I'd
President.
like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage who has personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide.
And
I'm the only one on
marijuana
this stage who has prosecuted
possession.
inmates for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I am the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of
There's only two
veterans.
people on the stage.
And the reality
That's
of this
just
is
not really a
that
smart thing to say.
We are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused to condemn white supremacists.
Not true.
And
Not true.
it wasn't like he didn't have a chance.
He said
He
sure
didn't
to
do
it
and then he
twice.
backed down. And then he said, when pressed,
He's done it several times.
stand by. And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban. On the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed, and on the other side there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs, and Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides.
There were.
This is who we have as the President of the United States, and America.
There were
deserves
fine people on both
better.
sides.
Joe
Both
Biden
sides
will
had
be a
violent
president
people,
who brings
but,
our country
and both
together
sides had people that were not
and
violent.
recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we
Senator
all
Harris,
have
thank
so
you.
much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people.
I think she talked for more than a minute.
Is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and has done so.
He said it right after he said fine people on both sides.
Concerned that he doesn't condemn neo-Nazis.
He's done it so many times. It's unbelievable how people are still arguing this.
This is a president who respects and cherishes all of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were
She had
DA
way more time.
in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney
Thank you.
General of California,
Thank you,
you
Vice President.
increased the disproportionate incarceration of
Thank you.
blacks in California.
She did.
You did
I don't know why she's nodding her head. That's her legacy. She did that. She totally did that. That is indisputable.
Your record
Thank
speaks
you,
for
Vice
itself.
President
President Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
We fought for
Pence.
educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our
Thank you,
minorities.
sir.
And we'll do it for 4 more
Thank you.
years.
You know, there is no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election
But
itself.
Susan, he attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let
He
me
told
give
the
you
truth
30
about your
seconds
record.
because we're running out of
I
time.
appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the
You know,
work that I
she's
did
she's
is a model
she's
of what
definitely.
our nation needs
It
to
seems
be.
like she's biased
And we
towards
will do
Kamala and
this
interrupts
under
Pence more.
a Joe Joe Biden presidency. Our
Because when Pence asks for more
agenda
time, she
includes
isn't
what
giving
this
it to him.
administration has failed to do. It will be
So-
about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes,
Thank you.
not only,
Thank you, Senator
I
Harris.
would like to go through,
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
but I
conclude our
want to talk
debate.
about the connection between what Joe and I will do.
This is
and
supposed to
what
end in like a minute.
Which includes, I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate a requirement that there would be a training for law enforcement on implicit bias because, yes, Joe Biden and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President, contrary to what you may believe. We did the work of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe and a commitment to reforming the
He told the
criminal
truth.
justice system of America.
Thank you,
You're a
Senator
bad
Harris,
cop.
and I'd like
You're a
to
tyrannical
pose the
cop.
First, I'd like you to respond first to the
Uh,
question
th-
on our final
That's
topic. the
it's
election.
not even
President
a
Trump has
question.
several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If your ticket wins and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what steps would you and Vice President Biden then take? What would happen next? You have 2 minutes.
So I'll tell you, Joe and I are, I think, particularly proud of the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We've
Gosh,
had
she
one of
talks
the
about them like
broadest
they're buddies.
coalitions
You
that
hated
we've ever
him.
seen in a presidency.
You hated him.
The support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President
Gosh, she's
George
so
W.
full of
Bush's
it.
cabinet
She hated him.
are
She
supporting
could
our
not
ticket.
stand him
We have
during the
the support
Democratic
of-
debates.
of Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John Kasich, over 500 generals, retired generals, and former national security experts and advisors are supporting.
Glad this is almost over.
And I believe they are doing that because they know that Joe Biden has a deep, deep-seated commitment to fight for our democracy. And to
We're not a
fight for the
democracy.
integrity of our democracy and to bring in
Not a democracy.
the White House. And so we believe in the American people.
Republic.
We believe in our democracy. And
Not a
here's what I'd
democracy.
like to say to everybody. Vote. Please vote. Vote early. Come up with a plan to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. You can also go to joebiden.com. We have it within our power in these next 27 days to make the decision about what will be the course of our country for the next 4 years. And it is within our power, and if we use our vote and we use our voice, we will win. And we will not let anyone subvert our democracy with what Donald Trump has been doing, as he did on the debate stage last week, when again in front of 70 million people, he openly attempted to suppress the vote. Joe Biden, on the other hand, on that same debate stage, because clearly Donald Trump doesn't think he can run on a record because it's a failed record, Joe Biden on that stage said, hey, just please vote. So I'll repeat what Joe said. Please vote.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Pence, President Trump has
I will
several
vote.
times refused to commit himself
I'm not voting for Biden
to
or Trump.
peaceful transfer of power after the election. If Vice President Biden
Thomas
is declared the
Hoefling is who
winner
I'm
and
voting
President
for.
Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as Vice President? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election. Because while
I think
Biden
they
and Trump
will,
just rattle off
but
and on,
honestly, who knows?
the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years.
Yeah, Thomas Hoefling is a
President Donald Trump is
pretty biblically solid platform. I voted for him in 2016. I'm going to vote for him again. I know he's not going to win. Don't care. Rather support someone like him.
2016. They see this president's record where we rebuild our military. We revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulation, fighting for fair trade, unleashing American energy.
Less regulation and less taxes are good. I don't know what.
With the men and women of law enforcement every single day. And I think that movement.
I don't know what's so hard to understand about that.
Stronger in the last 4 years. But when you talk about accepting the outcome of the election,
It's not a gray
I
area.
must tell you,
Let people. Whoops.
Senator,
Let people have their money.
Your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election.
Let people be free.
It's amazing.
Stop
Joe
taking
Biden, Vice President
from
of the
them.
United States, the FBI actually spied
Stop
on President Trump
stealing
and his campaign.
from businesses and
I mean, the
workers.
Republicans
Let
released
people
this
have their
week. The
income.
CIA
Let people
actually made a referral,
live.
to the FBI
It's
to
hard for
investigate
people to
the
pay bills,
was
not
alleged
because of
fraud
Trump,
in
but,
the Hillary Clinton
well,
campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche
because of
the
taxation
what you put the country through for
and where it's at in our country.
the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the Congress tried to impeach
There
the
wasn't
President of the
collusion.
United States over a phone call. And now Hillary Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So let me just say, I think we're going to win this election. President Trump and I are fighting every day in courthouses to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from changing the rules and creating this universal mail-in voting that will create a massive opportunity for voter fraud. And we have a free and fair election. We know we're going to have confidence in it. And I believe in all my heart that President Donald Trump's going to be reelected.
I'll be voting in person, like I always do when I vote.
I've written all the questions that I've asked tonight, but for the final question of the debate, I'd like to read a question that someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close tonight's debate with the question posed by Brecklin Brown. She's an 8th grader at Springville Junior High in Springville, Utah. And here's what she wrote, quote, "When I watch the news, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans. When I watch the news,
Pretty
all
much.
I see is citizen fighting against citizen.
Pretty much.
When I watch the news, all I see are two candidates from opposing parties trying to tear each other down. If our leaders can't get along, how are the citizens supposed to get along?" And then she added, "Your examples could make all the difference to bring us together," end quote. So to each of you in turn, I'd like you to take 1 minute and respond to Brecklin. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute.
Brecklin, it's a wonderful question. And let me just commend you for taking an interest in public life. I started following the news when I was very young. And in America, we believe in a free and open exchange of debate. And we celebrate that. And it's how we've created literally the freest and most prosperous nation.
This discussion and dialogue is good.
But I would tell you that don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people. You know, I look at the relationship
It's a good
between
point.
Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late justice who we just lost from the Supreme Court, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia. They were on polar opposites on the Supreme Court of the United States. One very liberal, one very conservative. But what's been learned since her passing was the two of them and their families were the very closest of friends. I mean, here in America, we can disagree. We can debate vigorously, as Senator Harris and I have on this stage tonight. But when the debate is over, we come together as Americans.
This is a much better. This debate was boring, so the entertainment factor isn't there like it was with the last one. But this is a much better debate.
Love a good debate. We love a good argument. But we always come together and are always there for one another.
Thank you,
in
Vice
times of need, and we've especially learned that
Thank you,
through
Mr.
the
Vice President.
difficulties of this year.
Senator Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her words, when I hear your words, Brecklin, I know our future is bright because
Young leaders.
it is
Did I miss
perspective
something?
on who we are and who we should be.
Did they say anything other than 8th grader?
That is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire to be. And that, that brings me to Joe. Joe Biden.
It's a terrible
one of
leader.
the reasons that Joe decided to run for president is after Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier. It so troubled him and upset him like it did all of us that there was that kind of hate and division. What propelled Joe to run for president was to see that over the course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way. And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. You mean, you have to know Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain, he has known suffering, and he has known love.
Caused it too.
And so,
It's
Breckman,
the suffering
when you
part.
think about the future, I do believe the future is bright. And it will be because of your
I do too,
leadership.
because I'm a
It will
post-millennialist.
be because
Has
we
nothing to
fight
do with
for
these
each
politicians.
person's voice through their vote, and we get engaged in this election because you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote
Thank you,
to
Senator
determine
Harris.
the future of our country and what its leadership looks like.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you so much for
Hopefully
being with us
different than what
tonight.
we're used to.
We want to thank also the University of Utah for its hospitality.
Not
And most of all,
Trump or
our
Biden.
thanks to all the Americans who watched this debate tonight. Again, our best wishes for a quick recovery.